Monaghans Galway, located on the Tuam Road, is the leading dealership in Galway for new SKODA, CUPRA and Seat models. Now is the perfect time to order your new car or visit Monaghans.ie. You're welcome along to the Maroon and White pod. So we're here this evening to look back on the refixed Hurling semi-finals, and safe to say Cappy and Loughrea in the county final. No one predicted this at the start of the year, and it was good to get a few texts from a good few Cappy people over the weekend to remind me that I written them off, and I apologise for that. So I do, but I am joined by Maurice Brosnan. And Maurice, as I'm saying there, if someone told you Cappy and even Loughrea where their injuries were at the start of the year as well, like not many would have predicted this county final pair.
At least you know they're listening, Paul. At least you know that they're tuned in. No, they wouldn't have, but they're two of them are, geez, are full value for it. Like, two, full value for their wins at the weekends. Two teams who've given us a lot of the high points that we saw in the championship this year. So as much as it's kind of there's a nice novelty around it. I was thinking about it earlier. I will eventually check this before the final. I'd say I think maybe since 2010, it's the first final where there isn't anybody who played, other than Jamie, obviously, who came on to weekend, who played senior championship for Galway that year. So, Tiernan obviously didn't. He was on the bench against Antrim. Liam Collins obviously didn't. But that's a rare phenomenon. And it says a lot about, I think, anyway, it says a lot about the quality of Galway hurling, that you've got lads who didn't play senior championship at all and they're in a county final and they're full value to be there. I think that's a positive reflection on amidst this kind of, in my opinion, kind of nonsense talk about where's Galway hurling at and all that kind of thing. I think that's a really positive sign for both teams. So yeah, look, there's for me personally, I think it's just kind of a bit of an excitement about it, and to see two teams that have given us some brilliant moments this year, and no more so than this weekend. Like in a weekend where you look across the country and you've got incredible club storylines all over the place, and you've got county final, incredible famines being ended and all sorts of things. And right up alongside that is people talking about Cappy, because even though it's a semi-final, like, because it deserves a spot amongst that sort of attention. So it's a good thing for Galway, and a good thing for the championship as well.
Because when you do consider it, at the start of the year, people would have had Thomas's, Turlockmore and Clarinbridge ahead of both of these teams.
Yeah, and I think, like, and part of that is, it's funny, like, part of that is just pure. I think about it from a Loughrea perspective, and like Loughrea, as much as you're trying to outthink teams and you're trying to outmaneuver teams. One of the biggest things is you need to try and outlast teams. Like, you need to, like, I hope he doesn't mind me telling this story. After the 2022 All Ireland final, the club final, when Loughrea were beaten in the replay, I was part of the media and we went down to talk to Tommy, and he didn't want to do it. And it was completely understandable, because he was broken. Like, it was such a tough loss to take. And to pick yourself up after that and go through, Jamie Murphy's injury and everything that has come at them since then, and to get back to the same stage again, I just think is so admirable. Like, from a management perspective and everything that goes with that. And, they got John Conlon involved last year, and there was a bit of talk about that, and they see the full value of that. So they got him back again this year and just stuck the course, like, that's such a hard thing to do. Like, it sounds easy, but the fortitude, like the mental fortitude, just to stick at it. And sure, is there a better example of that than Cappy? Like, you think about the players they've lost over years, like, you can list through them, like, guys like Dan Evan, and players, like really big players that aren't there anymore. The injuries they've had this year, Donald Mannion, we talked about that already from last week, and to turn all that around and to still, the tanking they took, like, to be straight about it, against Turlockmore, and still be back here in a decider is just, yeah, it's very admirable, Paul. Like, it's the ability to take that again and again. Like, you don't necessarily need to, I think this is true for sport in general. You don't necessarily need to be the absolute greatest. You don't necessarily need the smartest, but you do need to have that kind of steel to keep going and going and going. And there's two teams there who were classic examples of it.
Have you ever seen a turnaround like Cappy's there when you mention it? Because they were hammered against Turlockmore. Mullion nearly bet them in the final group game that actually could have knocked them out of the championship, because you would have had three teams on 2 points. Since they've turned it around since then, like, it's just so admirable, because that Turlock game, like, they looked a good bit off it at that stage.
They did, yeah. So, like, that the thing about that Turlock game was that generally they're pretty good on stopping opposition teams' puckouts that they tend to concede, drop deep, don't concede a huge amount about that. And Turlock came out and scored 1-8 off their own puckout that day, and that was a killer. The Mully game is different to me actually. Like that's like I'm just looking at it here. It's whatever 122 to 217, but it was 38 shots to 26. Like so they were. I think there was a bit of a gap there that day, and then like the big thing about it is one of the teams from just looking at it from my perspective is Cappy finished really strong. They really, and that has stood to them again the way they keep coming back like that. So like the Sarsfields game is a classic example. And I would have known the lads there, and that was like that, they just got a run at the end there, and then suddenly they're away. And similarly at the weekends, they finished really strong. They actually started pretty well as well, but I think that was slightly different in that I'm sure we'll get into it in a second. Like when in your life are you going to see Conor Cooney stand over 3 press balls and miss all 3 at the start of a game? Like that's so I think that might have been more to do with Tom's than it was through Cappy. But no, look, I think there were signs that they were moving in the right direction. I think there was signs all along that they have a pretty good bench there. They have players coming on who, whether they're able to take up the slack when lads are getting injured, or you see James Egan coming on and doing what he can do. So they have. There's always been a pretty good potential there, and then they have that kind of clutch moments. Players were able to. I'm thinking of Jazz Point in the first half, and he just I think was it his first score? He just catches the ball in 65 turns and swings, and like, geez, if that's your way of getting into the game, that's not bad. Skettle save from Enneberg's shot early on. Again, just that bit of class that you're going to need at this level. So they had all the raw materials there to get to this stage. I'm sure, like, as much as we're laughing about it, I'm sure to take a bit of relish in the idea that they were being written off and that they weren't going to live up to that potential. And that chip on the shoulder is a powerful thing. I think we're increasingly learning that, despite the fact we're in an age where everyone talks about internal motivation and all that kind of thing, there still is a place for the dressing room wall material.
Exactly, and the big thing I think has been Liam Collins' form, because during the inter-county season he obviously struggled with injury and he was trying to get back, and it's probably a lack of game time with him really, because he was in the summer then for the States and he's playing out with Galway Boston, and I suppose they were playing the one team there. I think it's 4 or 5 times when you're out in the States and Boston playing hurling, but like he didn't have a lot of game time. But as the championships went on, we've seen the best of Liam Collins.
That's it, exactly. And he found ways to just subtly get himself into games a lot. Like he was obviously taking the free. So even days when he was maybe held scoreless, he was still kind of keep tipping over. He's a very unselfish player. Like I think he's won 8 assisted in the championship so far. You look at like a completely basic thing. That in the first half when Skettle bombs the ball straight down on top of, and that's like you're standing beside Fintan Burke there. Like that's not an easy ball to win, and he lays it off, and that could have absolutely been a goal if it wasn't. I know the ball was dropped, but it was still a good save by Jordan. The 65 was missed. But just small stuff like that, just finding ways to get yourself into a game, to even if you're not going to absolutely light it up, to keep kind of taking over and to be unselfish, and that he gives them great shape, like in terms of being that kind of out ball that he is constantly jadding and then to roam in and out when he wants to. If they start John Mitchell too, he gives them a nice bit of structure up there too. So yeah, look, I think it's a massively encouraging thing. There's a couple of things like that from the weekend for me that were just to see the promise around the guy like Liam Collins. I'm sure we'll talk about it later. See Jamie back on the pitch was just brilliant. Like, so all that kind of stuff would have you pretty optimistic, I have to say.
I don't know if you have it on hand now, but statistically wise, like Cappy on long puckouts, it really has like worked this year for them.
Yeah, they're I don't know if they want me to go into that level of detail here. I'm getting some messages myself. Look, yeah, they're brilliant at it. Like they've got a very set way of playing, which suits them absolutely down to the ground. Like, so they even if they do that, they don't necessarily score a huge amount out of opposition's kickers, as I mentioned, because they tend to maybe drop off a bit. But then at the weekend, like you saw, very interesting to see how teams are using the conditions now. It's kind of become like a set format that when you have the breeze, you kind of like. I think, looking at it across the championship, Cappy's conversion has been very, very good. I'd say they're one of the highest in the championship. Like, they're fairly consistently clear of 60%, at times clearing 70%. At the weekend, I think they were 9 from 13 in the first half, despite the fact that they're playing with a gale. But that's because they judge that pretty well. They don't shoot blind, like so it's it nearly feels like the Garveys have license to shoot from long, and everybody else there's a bit of onus on you to work the ball in a bit closer and get your shots off kind of close to goal. So they're really good at getting good quality shots off very consistently. And a large part of that is what they do after a puck out, is their ability to get that long, get at the grounds. If they do work it short, it's not a crazy ball. They're trying to pick out Jar, Liam breaking either side, and if especially if you're at a game and you're watching the two boys moving, like they're just brilliant. Like they just really are constantly giving you that outlet. So look, yeah, there's a lot of that there that is very impressive.
The Collinses and Jam Mannion are going to be a lot of the players to get the headlines, but you mentioned them there, the Garveys and particularly Declan Cronin. Like they've been warriors of club hurling now for quite a while.
Yeah, like Declan is a firefighter. Like just in terms of what he does to mind the square, and like that's no mean thing. I think Lewis Coughlin is another fella who just gets through a pile of ball. To see him bunting Connor in the chest into the terrace side as well, which I thought, like, you need to see a bit of that too. Like that's important as well. The Garveys, like all three of them just have kind of integral roles in what they do. All three of them, I think, are very unselfish hurlers. Like, are willing to sacrifice their game if they need to for the cause, which is something that you really like to see. I thought Finn took his goal extremely well. Like, there's a lot there about them that you'd like. I mentioned James Egan already, so yeah, you're right. Like, and that's I'm sure when you look forward to the final, you'll be talking about matchups, and definitely the Lean one is going to be pretty interesting. But there's more than one threat there for sure.
So on the game as a whole, how do you think Cappy bet Thomas's?
I think it was interesting, right? At halftime, I was looking at just the shots. I think it was 13 shots each at halftime. So you were thinking, okay, with the wind, Thomas are going to come back here. Like they are going to, and that was in the back of my mind at halftime, definitely. Like I mentioned, the Aina to miss the goal chance, and then to Connor to miss the 65, and then missing a free, and you're like, geez, there's a couple of nice breaks coming here. And that I think that might have been a team during the game, and you need that. Like St. Thomas's will tell you that themselves. You look at the run they had, and as phenomenal as it was, you need a couple of breaks to go your way, and that was definitely the case in this game. Like, so, look at the shot at the very end of the game. Like, come back off the post. Look at Victor Manzo's goal that was chalked off. Like, on another day, I can absolutely see a referee giving that, and things might be different. I don't think Connor misses those frees again. So you need a breaks. The second thing then I think is that one thing that Cappy definitely did, especially in the first half, is that they stuck very manfully to their task. So I would say if you're looking at that in the stands on the day and you're seeing this amount of space Jane Cooney is in your head, you're saying change it. Like this is a bad idea. We're going to have to change something about this. He's got no space there. His first point from play, he poked that bomb like straight, and so you're saying this is a recipe for disaster. And they were brave enough to say, no, look, that was not the plan. We knew they were going to free up. We probably would have predicted that Finton was going to go inside on Liam. So we knew exactly what was, I don't know if they knew about the Duggan injury, but other than that, they knew what was coming. So they decided to stick to exactly what they were doing. I thought Skelly was very brave at his spoke out. He tends to go right to it's like chalk on boots, like, there's lads hugging the touchline, and he tends to go really. So if you're a fraction off there, and it has happened, you can't be perfect. Like that's ball out over the sideline. You've no safety net there. But they stuck to the task that way. And then, like I mentioned earlier, they're finished. Like just to I think there was a lot of us at that stage thinking, geez, that was a really brave effort, and this is just classic St. Thomas's who managed to find a way down the straight. And Cappy just roared into the game in the last 10 minutes. Like really just got a brilliant
Similar
run.
to the Saracens game where they hit 5 points in injury time.
Very similar, yeah, very similar. Like they have that ability to ride a wave, and they've got brilliant support. So the emotion of the whole place just comes thundering behind them, and they're absolutely flying. So you boil all that together, and yeah, and I think it partly explains it. There's no getting away from it. Like St. Thomas's that were on the road incredibly long time. I think we saw signs of that during the year, but somebody had to down the beast, and Cappy were brave enough to go and do it.
I do have to ask you about the Victor Manzo goal, because there's been a couple of supporters over and back debating whether this was a goal or not on Twitter. Liam Gordon obviously gives it for the throw in the lead up to the goal. Do you think that was a throw, or do you think the goal should have been awarded?
This is going to sound like a cop out answer. I need to see it slow down. I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure. Maybe somebody can send me the footage of it and they'll prove me wrong. But in the moment, I was saying, look, at Liam had a better view than I had of the even on the stream. Like when you see it first time, so I would need to see a slowed down version of it. I can uh, I'd say a lot of times players do get away with that. Like there's no getting away from that. That they definitely do. By that, whatever you want to call it, interpretation, it does feel harsh. But yeah, I'm honestly not sure. Like that's like breaks go for and against you, and this has happened for teams all over the place. And there's teams are going to have to put up with them going for you, and you're going to have to put up going against you. And Thomas can point to that as being a bad break. They can point to the All Ireland Club final as being a good break. This is the nature of the game, and by certain, there's a part of you that just has to be able to put up with that stuff, to not go crazy. Like you look at the Loughrea game, like Clarinbridge's goal, he handled that ball, he threw that ball up and caught it again. Like it was, again, that's just it's a very easy thing to get wrong, but you can be agreed about this stuff, or you can kind of do your best to go on and make up for that. And that's what they tried to do. Like in fairness, that shot at the end, that was real kind of, you're just adding to the lore of what brilliant champions they've been. So yeah, look, maybe that's a cop out answer, but I'm not fully sure.
Yeah, and even you're talking about the one as well where he hit the post as well, another goal chance they had. It just shows like it was real heart and sleeve stuff by Cappy. They were the better team towards the end, but they still just scrape over the line.
Yeah, and that's the mark of and I hope it's not forgotten, and I don't think it has been, certainly not internally, but just what brilliant champions St. Thomas's were and what they did for Galway hurling. Like actually, like a quick story. Like so, I before the club final last year, I wanted to write an article about the club, about St. Thomas's. So I got in touch with James Gogan, who's Claude, the hurling chairman's brother, is obviously involved in St. Thomas's, and asked, "Is there any chance you get a couple of people together just to sit down with me for a couple of minutes to chat about this incredible story, this Royal Club, and what they've gone on to achieve?" And without the St. Thomas's anyway, and there was 18 people turned up. 18 turned up in the club and these are just everybody from Sean Fahey and Mikey Coleman, who were involved in founding the club when they were 14, when there was nothing in the area. I didn't even have a pitch to use a priest local school. Did it a local postman who used to, like, think about that, like back in that, he used to walk around hand delivering posts around the village, and he walked there Drahan to get hurls and brought them back. And this is how this club founded. And these men are still there, they're still involved, and they saw everything that they went on to become, like, and from like that day dot to like this stunning success that came in the last decade. And there was people there who were able to tell me about playing an under 21 game, and this young 16-year-old David Burke hurling up a storm, and then he goes off injured, and the whole thing collapses like a house of cards, like that thing. And I remember that day when I met him, everybody in the room, like, don't have no doubt, they said to me repeatedly, "We know this won't last." Like, so they were savoring it in the moment. They enjoyed it. I have absolutely no doubt that they got their full value out of it. And I'm, we're particularly delighted that it went on to get their second All Ireland. But it also had a huge impact for Galway hurling, I think. Like, it really did bring on hurling, and it got some great rivalries there. And they went out with a mark on their backs every single day for at least the last 3 years. Like, they were facing, oh man, I remember I was at the Crofwell game in Kenny Park.
Yeah.
And I wasn't there as a journalist. Like, I just went to stand on the terrace so you're not in the stand, you're on the open side, which gives you a better view of certainly what goes on the sideline anyway. And that was the day John was sent off, obviously. Like, that was hot and heavy stuff now. And they went out and faced that every single day. Like, every day they went out with teams were gunning to put them down. So look, and I hope that's not lost or underappreciated in all this either. Like, they have been, what they've done for Galway hurling has been phenomenal.
And a reminder to people are unaware of the record, it's 41 games that this Thomas's team have won, and they've been a credit to Galway hurling. I suppose there probably is a sense now, Maurice, that I don't know, would other clubs in Galway be delighted, but Galway hurling fans are delighted that St. Thomas's got that second All Ireland.
I think so, yeah. Like, I think so, and I think they deserved it. Like, the Ballygunner game was just magnificent stuff, really, and was an absolute classic, like a complete thriller of a game, and they gave those kind of brilliant sport moments all the way along, and those couple of highlights, and even Aina's point. And don't get me wrong here, like, I sound like I'm they're not going away. I've absolutely no doubt about that. If there's any lesson from the last decade is don't write off this team. So, but it's just the fact that I think it is kind of important to mark while that whatever happens next, like that run that there was as frankly ridiculous as it was. So yeah, look, I'm sure there was a lot of people delighted to see them get the second All-Ireland. I'm sure there's a lot of people delighted to see them beat too. Like that's the nature of it.
In particular, on Saturday, Éanna Burke to stand out for them, 4 points from play.
Yeah, excellent again. And then just again doing what he typically does in terms of just giving them a great option. I thought that's there's a stretch in the first half where Connor has a couple of wides and Cappy go 4-1 up, I think, and then Connor Cooney just drops really deep. He's basically in his own half and he's foraging everywhere and he's putting in unbelievable tackles. Gets a great turnover and pucks the ball straight down the line, and it's just it's if you're looking up and you see it's a dream. Like it's a forward breaking at pace coming. There's a 5 or 6 yard separation from him and his man, and he just picks that ball and drills over the bar. And you're like, okay, yeah, you're into this game. And he was constantly trying to produce that bit of magic, like whether it be the shot at the very start or the shot at the very end. He was consistently trying to be the man who was going to produce the clutch moment that they were looking out for. So yeah, like there's no surprise there. I thought he was brilliant.
Jam Mannion and Niall Collins obviously terrific as well, and like Liam's obviously being with Galway, but are Jan and Niall Collins giving the Galway management something to think about at the minute?
I think Liam is definitely, yeah. I'd say Michal knows a lot about certainly Jar already. And it's the kind of players that and it's one thing that like to see as money. It's not a criticism of the previous management, but when you've got as many Galway locals there, they just know the tendencies. They know what, not just about the players themselves, but what makes them tick. Like they know their character as well, which is very important. So, yeah, I think so. Like I think you would kind of hope to see a bit of a, the perception that players weren't getting a chance that was there for the last couple of years. You would really hope that is just absolutely flattened early on, and we see a whole host of players get their chance. I think Liam has been on this trajectory anyway. There was a lot of, I think, disappointment really that last year didn't quite work out the way that a lot of people would hope for him and obviously for Galway as well. So, yeah, look, I think that's part of it. Like definitely that you're hoping to see these players who are like Jazz, another one. Like again, another guy who's, I think he's up at 7 or 8 points created as well as the phenomenal scoring he's doing. So, I'm sure that what I'm saying is I'm sure it came as no surprise that they are as good as they have been this year.
Just before we get on to the other semi-final, we talk about a novel final between Cappy and Loughrea, but even a novel final in Kenny Park too. It's hard not to be excited for this one.
Yeah, it is just a mad spot, like, and there's a lot of attractions around that, and I mean I heard you talk to the boys about this there recently as well, like, and I fully agree with all the plaudits that the Kenny Parks get. I do think that the place can tend to skirt close to the line at times. Like I think the sidelines can be fairly wild there, and you'd hate to see that become like an issue that gets a kind of national attention like that. That you're skirting close to you're in the hard shoulder there, like you don't want to go too much further over, and even banal stuff like they police the pitch very, very well. And then sure, the gates are open the fraction when teams are coming off at half time. And you saw what happened in the second game with the row at half time. I just think that the stuff like that could be organized a small bit better. But by and large, like it's a savage spot. It does feel like, I don't know, do you remember see at the end of this game, there's your man climbing on top of the dugout for,
Yeah.
for the last couple of minutes, getting ready for the pitch event. Like there is kind of that kind of novel element of the place too. And that's absolutely class. So like, yeah, I cannot wait for that.
It is crazy to think when we were talking about Thomas's 7 in a row, going for 7 in a row this year, and it's been stopped. They obviously did 6 in a row last year, and now you're thinking that Capitagle are in the senior hurling final for the very first time in their club's history.
Yeah, and again, like that's I think that's part of the reason this captures like a national audience at the weekend. It's not just the fact that, like, I think St. Thomas's record in semi-finals was phenomenal up until last year. I think that was the first time in 4 or 5 years that there was a team within one score of them in a semi-final. So and Sarsfield put it right up to them that day. But it's just the fact that it's not Turlock have gone to war with them. Loughrea were in the rebuild final. That it's kind of it feels like to a lot of people, it feels like kind of a new team. I'd say not necessarily to people on the ground that might have saw that the raw materials were there, but definitely just that really adds to why it was as class as it was.
In particular, now to just move on to the second semi-final, Loughrea, Clarinbridge. In the last three meetings last year, county quarter-final, Loughrea beat Clarinbridge. In the group game, Loughrea beat Clarinbridge. And the semi-final, Loughrea beat Clarinbridge. That's three times they've won in the last year against Clarinbridge. It's safe to say they do have, I suppose, the Indian sign over Clarinbridge at the moment.
And I'd say the killer thing for them is that beating them in similar ways. Um, like you know, um, there's a lot to like about Clarinbridge, but their puck out is very susceptible, and it has been, and teams have gone after that. And I saw it in the league final. That there are when there's a chink there, the teams do tend to get on top of that and go after it. And Loughrea did it in the group stage. It was something that they targeted and got on top of. And same thing at the weekends. And you look at that second goal, and I'd say they'll have nightmares about that. Like, it's just as soon as that ball is lost, and it's a Brian Kerry come down the middle there, and it's just he's just way too much space. Like, for a centre channel to be driving down like that down the middle, it just can't happen really. So I'd say that'll be a huge frustration, something that they obviously knew about, but sure, like, just clowns like me who are able to point out issues, actually solving them, that's the hard part. Like, that's the finding the solution is really difficult. So look, I mean, I think there's a lot of things from a Clarinbridge perspective that I'd say the year was. It's very disappointing for the year to finish because they did.
Do you think they'll be disappointed with the year?
I'd say definitely, yeah. Like, they did. There was a bit of a shake up in the coaching ticket, and there was obviously the national attention that came with the whole commandments and all that kind of thing. And then none of their boys went away to the States, so they were very strong. Even that league final I mentioned, they were really strong that day, like close to their best. So they're going at it hard and early. So like you feel like you've ticked every box, but basically, like, you feel like you're doing all ask, and then when it ends the way it does, you're left asking yourself, what'll be different about next year. So thankfully for them, they have, not to put too much pressure on them, but they have the idea that they can look over and see, okay, Aaron is coming, and that'll, like, there's no getting away from it. There is a reliance still there on Evan Island to be their both scorer, and I thought that kind of showed them to a certain extent, actually, especially with a couple of missed frees each side of half time there. So I'd say they will be massively disappointed. Yeah, that it didn't work out the way it will. I thought they rallied very admirably at the weekends from, was it 2-11 to 9 points at half time. But the way they kind of fought back in and got themselves right into contention, and I think there's the small little solaces you'll be able to, to wrap your head around. Like, at half time, it was 16 shots to 18 shots. So despite the fact that you're 8 points down, you're saying, like, geez, if Caelan had just been able to stick his goal early on that day, or even in the second half, the Keen's Hammer one that he creates after, they got two really good chances there. Even the game finishes 30 shots to 28 shots, and that's not including, there was a bit of mess at the end there with the 65s, and Evan had a free that he had to go for goal. They were chasing the game at that stage, but if you don't even count them, they still created more opportunities there. So I just think it's those slips that'll be really, really frustrating, but there won't be much solace now today, that's for sure.
Darren, Shaughnessy's goals in the first half, there's no point in saying otherwise, they were crucial to Loughrea, and they probably did put the contest to bed somewhat when you consider Loughrea going ahead by 8 at the break. But it probably did kind of flatter Loughrea in one sense, because it was 10-8 right before that.
Yeah, and that's like that. The first goal is like, think about where that comes from. That comes from a Clarinbridge puck out. It goes long, breaks, is turned over twice, the long ball in, and to the edge of the square. It's hilarious that the exact same thing happens at the other end of the pitch, and Hanrahan manages to get it to ground really, really well. And then they go up to the other end, and it's another long ball at the edge of the square, and that Dylan does with it very admirably. And I thought, like, it's funny, I've talked to a couple of friends about this game today. I really enjoyed the opening exchanges of this game. I did more so than I think I get the sense than other people. Like, you're looking down and you're looking at the matchups on both ends, and you're saying, right, there could be a bit of crack in this, like TJ on the edge of the square, and Anthony, they're kind of, and they're hopping off each other, like, and I thought all of that kind of fed into even like the tearing his hearts like a house on fire and it's kind of creating all around him. But all of that kind of added to it. There was a bit of bite in this, which was good to see. Like you wanted, there was a large element of that, and you could see both sidelines were getting ratty at different times as well, and it all just felt like a real championship game. So I was enjoying it right up until, as you mentioned, that stretch definitely. And then there was a 10-minute stretch in the second half where I felt like very little actually happened at the start of the second half. But for 20 minutes, this game looked like it could have been a right dinger. And then, sure, it's the goal. And then the next puck got turned over and it's a point. And then the same thing happens again. And it's another point. And suddenly it's a 5-point swing in the matter of seconds. And from that point, you're just chasing for the rest of the game, really.
It's been their appearance of dominance, Loughrea, when you consider both games against Clarinbridge. When they've got on top, they've just been able to put games to bed.
Yeah, they have. And they have, I think they have a lot of kind of, what's the word, like that resilience that I mentioned earlier. Like they've lads like, you see Shane O'Brien coming out in the first half and the big roar to the stand, and see, and even Paul Hoopen back, and I thought he got in a world of ball early on, like, and won a lot of frees there. And Shane Morgan went to Gavin Lee and was really trying to turn the screw there, and once they were on top there, they were well able to just get they're very, very adept at getting that. I think after the first goal there was 2 chances, and then eventually Evan actually got a point to get it back to 2. But they are particularly good at turning the screw when they get that second goal. Is a classic example of it, to get a run. And even on their own side, Loughlin will get really high tempo puck outs and they'd inject a lot of pace into a game. They're really good at controlling the game. Jamie Ryan will only add to that when to see him back was brilliant. Probably obviously needs a bit of hurling. I think that showed too. But like that's another thing that they're particularly good at, is their ability to kind of manage the game that way.
The big thing about Loughrea, like last year, I found obviously it was such a hammer blow in the semi-final against Turlockmore when Jamie obviously gets injured in the week leading up to the game and he misses it. But we were all waiting for that moment last year of just a Loughrea Thomas's final, and it just didn't happen. Turlock bet them fair and square in that semi-final. But to turn it around when there was such expectation last year is just massive for this group.
Yeah, it is. And like I think it is. I still think there's a bit of mental baggage there for a game like the final now. Like there's I'm sure I'll end up being pinned up on a dressing wall here somewhere, like, but there is a bit of expectation around them to get it, to finally get it done now in the final, and that brings its own baggage in itself. And saying that, I think they cope with stuff like, especially this year, particularly well. There was that moment in the first half where like I thought it was like Tierney clean in the Jamie Ryan role, basically, where like he fixed that ball back to Sweeney for that monster point, his second point. Then he's the one with does the exact same thing with Kerry, wins a break, gets it up and is very unselfishly lays it off, and you can see them kind of knitting it. Even the third goal, like that's 2 times where they try to play the ball through the lines. First time it breaks down, it's a long ball, they get it back and they stick to the plan. Like they just work that ball absolutely lovely. It's a ball into a corner, 1-on-1, and as soon as Shaughnessy passes man there, you knew there was like the 2 up there. You knew exactly what they were trying to work, and sure didn't he stick it. So they do have a brilliant, but they know exactly how they want to hurl. There's complete clarity in what they're trying to do. And you can see it that they definitely, I think that the biggest challenge for this final is that exactly what you touched on there, is there's a bit of weight in the shoulders now. Like just teams saying they're going to go into this game as favourites, and teams are saying, right, this is, you don't have the monster that is Thomas's anymore. If not now, when? And that'll be a big thing that they have to do with.
You're taking the Derek McGrath quote there, if not now, when?
Well, I think there is that expectation is the word. Like there is that expectation that they like Loughrea were a team that have been earmarked for a very long time. When they hurl at their best, they are brilliant to watch. But all that brings pressure, and you can process that whatever you want. Like we can make pressure be a privilege. But that's definitely something that I'm sure that they have people there that are more than adept at dealing with that. So I don't think it's necessarily going to cripple them or anything like that, but it's just something that's going to have to be dealt with.
Just interested to get your views here. Jamie Ryan comes off the bench at the weekend. Does he start in a county final?
I don't think so. I think he's a lovely player to spring. I definitely think he was right to go for goal, by the way. Definitely think he was right to go for it. That's a 4-point game. You can bury the game there. So if he taps over the bar, the game can swing very, very quickly. So I thought that was the right option, is to to be brave and to go and bury it. But I think it was kind of obvious to me that he needed game time. And I think if he's coming off a bench, he's an unbelievable option. And you could spring him earlier if you want. But you got to have that punch. Even you look at it from Clarinbridge perspective, and halftime you see Salmon warming up, and then he comes in and has the impact that he does. And that was a huge reason that they got back into the game the way that they did. Like you've got to, and Cappy, I mentioned earlier with the punch that Cappy are getting off their bench as well. So the fact that they can have that and have him, and even Shaughnessy brother to coming on as well. Like they definitely have players that you'd be worried about if you're looking over towards the sideline. So I wouldn't necessarily go and if you ask me right now, I'd say no.
It's the biggest thing since I suppose Loughrea lost that replay. If you look at the scores last day, Darren Shaughnessy 2-1, Anthony Burns 1-3, Tiernan Killeen 4 points, Cayman Killeen 2 points. All those players under the age of 24, but becoming the leaders of this Loughrea team now.
Yeah, and you can see that they want to take it on. Like they want to. I thought Tiernan was a classic example of that. Like I know I feel like every time I come on this, I'm talking about him. Like, but I'm just a huge fan of that. Like his whatever, his hurling is obviously his class, but just the head and his shoulders. Like I mentioned to you before the Fitz game when he was down in Dora Bearfield against Cork for NUIG, and you just ran the show that day, and you can see that he's just a really intelligent hurler, and that's Anthony Burns. I think he saw Anthony Burns very early in the game was like the first. I think it was his first ball he won. He's just took on TJ and said, "I'm going at you here all day. I'm going to make your life really, really tough here." And like is this the position for you? Let's find out today. Like so, I was really trying to turn the screw there and push that. So yeah, look, they seem to be. I even came clean. Like he comes very, very deep, but gets through a pile of work. Like, so all of that is positive. Yeah, I think they have seemed to have shouldered it very well.
On this one, and like we've mentioned Clarinbridge there, is the biggest thing with Clarinbridge that they need to find, like if you're looking at next year for them. Obviously, I think the biggest thing Clarinbridge will want is David Ford and obviously Miho to stay as well, if he can. But like 10 points the last day from Evan, and I was just saying in the lead up to the game that I felt if Clarinbridge were to win this, the likes of David Lee, Joshua Ryan, these players, that they were going to have to come up and score 3, 4, or 5 points, and the majority of the scores just came from Evan from the place ball.
Yeah, and even Evan is trying to he gave a ball to Josh Lee or Josh Ryan on the front of the stand there at one stage where it was nearly like the shot was nearly on for himself, but you could see he was nearly. If I felt like he was nearly conscious that we need to get them into the game here, that we like that was something that was wearing slightly. So yeah, like that's there's if you're looking at this, Paul, like it's go back to my point at the very start here. You're not saying tear up the script here. You're not saying you're like, can you find an extra 5%? It could literally be that. So it's not. It's what I'd say from a commitment perspective, from a training perspective, they ticked every box this year. So you're just trying to get again, like I think there will be a bit of Aaron coming along will give it a nice little buzz, and locally there certainly will seem to be able to latch on to that. And then you just need one or two other players to step up in that vein and to be able to show that slightly more. But in saying that, like they had, like as I mentioned to you, like they had more chances. They had 2 goal chances at a minimum. You could actually argue 3. There was one very early where it was ball squared across. There was was it even a square across? It was actually going for goal there. I'm not necessarily sure, but so they were like they're not a million miles away either.
Yeah, it's not often I'm right about predictions on the podcast, but I did predict Loughrea by 7 and it was 6, so I will take credit for that one. Just on this, you're going to have Cappy and Loughrea now in the county final November 10th. That's taking place, but when you see the teams that go out at the weekend, out of the hurling championship, and you see obviously the teams now are going to enter Leinster and Munster provincial campaigns and Ulster, of course, the winner of Cappy and Thomas's will go into, or sorry, Cappy and Loughrea will go into an All Ireland semi final. Like this is a big chance too for a Galway club.
It is definitely, yeah. Like there's no getting away from that. Like the way you look across at the weekend, and basically it's the same thing. Like as soon as Thomas were gone, there was talk immediately about O'Loughlin Gales, and sure then they were beat, and the fact that you have a lot of like so many first time winners. I think we were talking off there about Dara Donovan and the doing celebrations. Like that's going to be a factor. That is a genuine thing that teams are going to be when they get that breakthrough, they're going to be enjoying themselves. There's a bit more legal room from a Galway club's perspective. It's a road that a lot of players won't have been down before, and that is definitely a factor. Like I think of a club like Ballygunner, and they know the rhythm of this time of the season so seamlessly. Like they get whatever done and dusted, organize a couple of challenges, don't go necessarily full bore early on either, and just continually like to tick along to this stage. So they know this part of the year that's seamless. This will be new ground for either club, really, from a Galway perspective. So that's definitely a factor. But look, yeah, there's no getting away from the reality of it, which is that there's a lot of teams that have kind of a similar level here now, and a lot of them are looking at this and thinking, geez, there's a serious chance if we can get over this hurdle that things could come together fairly quickly here.
When you're referencing there, if not now, when for Loughrea, do you see Loughrea as favourites going into the county final?
I do, just purely because they've been there. Like they have been there. They've been coming to this stage. Now there is sometimes your name is written on the cup, and there's that sense around Cappy as well that they're doing what they're doing, and they're producing something kind of phenomenal every single day. And but like I'm by no means am I convinced of it, but I do think from if you're looking at it from a Loughrea perspective, things aligned fairly seamlessly. Like they came together in the group stages. They never got that absolute mincing that some teams other get that they need. That they just continually kind of seem to be able to find that bit more. They got squad kept together more or less. Even Shaughnessy coming back, management kept together. So all of that is aligned there. And look, you can only take that kind of heartbreak and loss so many times. So if they weren't to get it done, I think that would definitely linger as well. But so yeah, that's basically what I'm getting at there is that when you look at all the indicators up to this point, there is a bit of a sense that this is their time too.
Is this the most open Galway hurling final in this decade?
There is a question. Like there was, I'm tempted to say yes, but there was definitely in a couple of those Thomas final, in Thomas's Loughrea final, there was tips for Loughrea like, at the time, like that they were just were the team coming. So there was, I think, and I think like it's same thing with Turlock. So I'm tempted to say yes, but I think that a lot of the finals actually have been more open. It's only in hindsight. It all makes sense. Right? You look back and see Thomas's run, and you're like, sure, of course they won all those. But then you look at the intricacies of it, and they were pushed. Like there were at times there they got some savage challenges, and it stood to them coming through it. So I'm going to say if it fits in kind of that category, it is an extremely open game, but those games were particularly open too. I think I've copped out in that question there a small bit.
I know you referenced it at the start, but I think it's a point that needs to be made. When you're looking at the Cappy and Loughrea teams and you're looking at the clubs, the amount of young players that have stepped up this year throughout the championship, like I don't think there's an argument now that people can say the young hurlers aren't here in Galway.
Oh, amen. Absolutely, amen. No, I didn't think there was an argument that before this championship either. To be honest, like like you just have to look at it. Like look at the amount of Galway hurlers that are playing in fits. Like look at what's coming out of underage teams. Like it just doesn't add up for me. It never really stacked up. Like I think there was definitely a goal for a couple of years there that were players coming through technically absolutely up to speed. Even tactically, I think they were up to speed. Physically, I'm not so sure, but that has been bridged now. So yeah, look, I was never in doubt about that. I'd like to feel I kind of nearly feel vindicated by the fact that that realization is starting to dawn elsewhere as well. So yeah, like I never had a doubt about that. There was factors. I think like to be fair to the previous Galway management, I think they knew how good Liam Collins was, for example, and that they wanted him to play more of a part and just injuries doesn't necessarily work out the way they wanted them to. But so some of this wouldn't come as a surprise to them. But yeah, like there's no, that was never in question for me, and I think this year proves it.
What Galway hurlers would you like to see in 2025 when we're talking about these younger players?
From these clubs or generally?
Generally, like that, who stood out that you feel could make a significant impact and establish themselves?
I'm going to make this point once more, and then I'll ban myself from breaking them up when the podcast again. I'd like give Turning a proper
Yeah.
run. Like let just
Is
whether it be at
11
six.
is 11 his best position now?
I still liked what I saw at six, and I thought that there was when you were looking at it on paper that there was a bit of a need from like Galway were experimenting a lot in that regard and was a thing. But then you see how good he is in the play and taking on the frees the way he has, and doesn't seem to have phased him so far. So I can see the logic of that. But I would just love to see a consistent running games where you're backed to you're not going to be in and out here. You're going to get a chance to find your feet and to prove yourself. And I think he's more than ready now. So we've mentioned Liam Collins as well. More broadly, I think there's a couple of players across the championship. It's similar thing, like just get a Gavin Lee, like get a proper run. You know, like can you get it? Not. I just wasn't a fan of this thing of letting lads go and calling them back and they go again. Alex Kinnear, like just get him in and get him uh, a proper run of games. I think is really important. So I look, this was one thing that in their first reign, Michal was very, very good at, really good at almost like internships, getting guys in, getting a part of leadership programs, exposing to them, and gradually bringing them through. So it's not a major concern for me. Like it's not. I think there will be players will get the chance that, in my opinion, they deserve next year.
Yeah, I think when you're referencing that point, it's like what we've seen this year in the league. TJ Brennan played at fullback against Tipperary, and I'm not even sure did he play again after that for Galway in 2024. And if he did, it was very little game time. But for these younger players to develop, like I don't think you're in the age where it's one chance and it's just gone. Then like it's consistent running games these players need.
And there is a logic to keeping your squad small. I absolutely see why certain managers prefer to do that. But in my opinion, it's the time to do that. It's not during the Walsh Cup. Like you should, I don't cutting lads during the Walsh Cup and then calling them back during the Walsh Cup is not the way to do it. I think those players need it's just been a long term outlook on this too. Like that, it might maybe they won't have a stunning impact in 2024 or in this case 2025, but I'm reasonably confident that it'll stand to them for what's coming down the tracks after that as well. So as we've mentioned, like there's a lot of players across the country are putting the hand up. I know there's another thing that is kind of encouraging to see players who had particular struggles with injury. To see Jamie Ryan back was really encouraging. To see Kevin Cooney come back from his injury was really encouraging. So things like that are would have you pretty optimistic, I'd have to say.
Just on one point, we had Sir Farrell on the podcast last week. I was asking, was there anyone from the Senior B final that stood out? He was talking about Jason Rabbit and his
I heard it,
influence.
yeah.
Yeah, and you would have obviously had too. Sean Murphy, who was on that minor team that Fergal Healy was over. Do you think it's too early to be looking at those players, or do you feel they're players now that you have to look at?
Jordan, I'll be very curious to see, and it's in fairness to Henry Shefflin, it was something that he was big on early on the first year. The development panel. I'll be curious to see what to do in that regard next year. I know it's a split season, and maybe from Michal's perspective, he feels like he knows enough about these players anyway. But that kind of bridging point, I don't see any harm in it. I definitely I don't see any harm in it. And if you can find a sufficient avenue to give them exposure, I thought, to be honest, what the footballers did last year was a very good mechanism to maximize that, to give them, they were different, but they were integrated and they had competitive games that they could play in, and there was a proper organization around it. And I know like that first year there was a couple of hurlers, like intermediate hurlers. I think Eamon Brannigan from Rahun was actually called in after the back of leaving the footballers that year, stuff like that. And it's just kind of a nice way of trying to get from point A to point B. So in theory, I like the idea of that. Now maybe there's no need from that because you keep a really big squad early on and you see as much as you want to see, and then you can start to funnel it down after. But that's the main thing. I just think even like perception is not reality, Paul, but perception is important. So if you could just set the perception that we're interested in looking at these players, that we're going to bring them in and have a look at them, as opposed to like how long was Garage Kelly brought in for last year? Like it was a couple of weeks anyway. Like so, I just think get them in there early, have a right good look, and then see where you're at after that. And there will inevitably have to be a funneling down, but before that, let them feel like they've got a sufficient audition.
By the sounds of it, you're tipping Loughrea for the county final, but We will have a in-depth intermediate preview final coming up as well, because that's obviously going to take place. Teen Abbott and I, we do play Kinvara in that final coming up. Who are you tipping to win the intermediate title?
I haven't. I'm not tipping Loughrea yet. Don't don't put words in my mouth. Look, I think they will be favourites and justifiably. I find that game way harder to call. Look, there's a lot to talking about fines in a way like Kinvara's ability to do that. Like, and that's like, man, that is such a it's an intangible. Like, and it can feel like a thing that is very very difficult to manufacture in a team. But if you have that ability to dig deep and to just like as a when you're looking at it in teams, it's such an admirable quality that and it doesn't necessarily have to be the same person every single time. So and that just sorry to go back to it for a second. It's another thing about Cappy is that they they seem conscious of that like Finn's goal, like that was in the back of their minds from the moment that ball was inside there. That it was just that kind of idea that this is go back to that point, if not now, when, like this is the moment, this is when you have to go and take it. So look, I'm giving nobody ammunition but my predictions here to come and use it as motivation on the line. I leave that to you later in the week.
Well played there. Uh, that's all we do have time for on the podcast for this evening. We will have an intermediate preview, as I mentioned, and of course a senior final preview next week coming up. But that's all we do have time for. Thanks a million to Maurice for coming on.
Thanks, Paul.